And I think I made a sort of comment along those lines of it's not the size, it's the quality, the nature, the format. You can generate synthetic data and produce a huge whopping database, but it's not going to be used for anything. What is the point?
Welcome to How AI Happens, a podcast where experts explain their work at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence. You'll hear from AI researchers, data scientists, and machine learning engineers as they get technical about the most exciting developments in their field and the challenges they're facing along the way. I'm your host, Rob Stevenson, and we're about to learn how AI happens. Here with me today on How AI Happens is a guest who has had a very interesting background in our space in data and algorithm selection, all sorts of other areas. So much so that I kind of don't want to hamstring your intro by trying to do it poorly myself. I'll just bring you in. Jennifer Stirrup, founder of Relish. Welcome to the podcast. How the heck are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on How AI Happens. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. And I swear I'm not being lazy by not introducing you. I just really think that it's better, coming directly from the source. So since I wanted to leave it up to you, Jen, maybe here at the top, I'll just ask you to share a little bit about your background, how you wound up in the space, and what you're working on right now over at Relish.
I've always been a geek around data and technology. I learned to code when I was 8 years old, so a very long time ago.
What did you learn to code on?
I learned to code in BASIC on a Sinclair ZX81, and it had 16 KB of memory. So it was a very long time ago. We had to load the computer with tapes. So it's a very long time ago, but I think I was so inspired by older members of my family. Some of them were spies during the Second World War. They were using Enigma and the purple machines to crack codes. And one of my great uncles works with Alan Turing. So he had such a great interest in AI and maths, and I think he inspired me. So I'm very lucky to go to university, study AI. Again, I did that before the year 2000, so it was a long time ago. I'm very glad to say that AI is becoming easier and easier all the time. And I'm working on some really great projects. I do some mentoring for startups. So I like doing that because it's great to see the success that they can have, and it's such a great, energetic environment to work in. I also deliver projects for much larger customers as well, and I tend to get involved to try and help them to onboard data science and AI. And that's not just from a technology standpoint, but from a people and a cultural standpoint as well.
Did your uncle have any Alan Turing stories that he shared over the years?
He just said that Alan Turing was almost like a god. People had such respect for him, and that was really his takeaway about Alan Turing. He seemed to think that he was a real demigod. You would see him walking around Bletchley Park, and you get a sense of the energy coming from him. So I think it was inspiring for me to feel that there was a personal connection with AI from a very early age.
What do you think Alan Turing's legacy is in terms of AI? Do you think this is like the logical progression from some of the early work he did in computing?
Yes, I think it is. I think I get the sense when I've read his materials, his papers, that is something he explained very well. He seemed very keen that people would understand the concepts of it. It was something, when you read his papers, it comes across very well. So I think he probably would have appreciated how popular AI has become.
Yeah, I should hope so. Jennifer, you have had an interesting background in that. Lots of the people I speak with on the show, they've been in academia for a long time. They've had roles as machine learning engineers or as software engineers. And it seems like you've sort of been able to march to the beat of your own drum for most of your career. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. I'm a terrible employee, I have to say. So perhaps that's the reason why I run my own business. When I started a career after leaving university, I was very lucky to be involved in working in mainly the finance industry, getting involved in first generation AI algorithms. I was using those to help answer email. It may seem strange now, but at the time in 1990s, email was a big thing. And companies sensed that they were not going to be able to handle the email and they needed to automate some of that. And I think it's probably something we still struggle with today. I don't know about you, Rob, but I get far too many emails, and I do think I would love to automate these. So I feel like the industry is coming full circle now that we are starting to automate more and more as time goes on.
How did you sort of forge a career in this space where you didn't need to be an employee, having noticed you were a terrible one, or perhaps not even enjoying it? How have you forged this ability to go into large companies and startups as well and sort of poke around in their data operations?
I think what's helped me is to have a very customer focused perspective. You have to consider that you are only as good as the last project you did. So even though I've been working in the industry for 25 years, I still treat every project as if it's important. I really focus on the business value of whatever it is we're trying to do. So it could be that I'm trying to save costs or improve customer service, or perhaps a small research and design project as an example. So I think when you deliver each project to the best for everyone with good outcomes, word starts to spread. Because when you work with business leaders and then they leave and go and start to do something else, they take people with them. So I've been really lucky in that respect that I've had a really good network. And I think it's just that ethos of just working really, really hard and making sure that you deliver, you over deliver every single time, beat people's expectations.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, that leaders leave places, but then if you have delivered for them, you make them look good, right? So if they go into their new company and you execute this awesome project, you've really like you get compensated, but they're the one who like logs the organizational cachet, right? Like they get the credit in a way for bringing you in. And so you deliver for people, they'll never forget it.
Yeah, that's true. I think sometimes I get asked to do canary in the cage projects. And what I mean by that is the canary, if it dies, people don't seem to care. And so I sometimes get involved in really risky projects because as an external consultant, I can be expendable. But I think the secret is to show small iterative successes and keep proving because people will align themselves with a success and they'll walk away from a failure. So if you keep pushing and getting those small steps of success, people start to help you.
Yes, yes. It's just building momentum slowly over time. Here in the colonies, we say canary in a coal mine, but it's the same idea. It's that like this is the harbinger of like, oh, if there's a leak, then the canary dies first and then everyone else knows how to get out. But yeah, it's an interesting approach for you because maybe internal employees might not want to touch a really sticky problem because they're afraid of, I don't know, like what are they afraid of? It not going well or failing or making things worse. Whereas you can, like you say, you don't work there, so it's easy to fire you if it goes wrong.
That's right. I think also I've got a fresh pair of eyes. Sometimes I go into organisations because they have failed to do this by themselves. So when I come in, they don't always like it. Say, for example, of problems with the IT department because they've tried to do this and then they failed. And sometimes I find it useful to think about people as laggards or who is going to be the leaders and the visionaries in the organisation and try and single them out. I think it's also very important in AI to have an executive sponsor, someone who can really unblock any obstacles for you, because that is a really important thing with any IT project, but particularly with AI, because people are worried it's going to fail, they're worried it's going to threaten their jobs in some way. And because of that, they're thinking to themselves, how can I not be involved with this? And one way to do that is to say, Jennifer, no. The answer's no before I've asked the question sometimes.
Who is that advocate? Does it tend to be like a chief technology officer, VP of engineering? Who do you kind of look for to fill that role?
The CTO usually, or the CDIO. So I usually report in either to the board or to the C-suite. And I think because some of these projects are so necessary, it has to have that sort of visibility on it. What I tend to see happening is in boards, particularly, there's usually one visionary and there's some laggards, and that's at the board level. So that sort of disconnect within the leadership can really translate into technology projects because the rest of the board might not be on board with the project itself. So I'm under usually a lot of pressure to try and get things to work, to show success early. But I'm very lucky in that I think having a good network helps. I can start to bring along partners to help deliver if that needs to happen.
Part of the reason I was excited to speak with you, Jen, is because you get to see lots of different companies. You know, when I speak with people who are internal installed somewhere, they understand that company's problems very well, but you get to see more of a landscape of things that people are struggling with in the space. So I'm curious, what is common out there when you're brought in to places? What are the kinds of common challenges you see companies facing with regards to their data and AI operations?
I think probably the biggest thing is access to the right data and having a really good data platform. So sometimes organizations seem to think that a data platform is simply a database. But what actually happens is they've got pots of information all over the place. They can't match it up very well. They can't access the data. They don't know what the data means. So then they bring me in and I have to say, well, how well do you know your data? And they'll say, well, we tried to build a data dictionary and that didn't work and we're too busy for all that. And I have to say, but you need a good foundation. I know it's not a popular message. So I try in that case to start small. I say, right, we start with this data set. We're going to mix it with that data set. And in our first few sprints, we'll start to show some good business intelligence because without good BI, you can't have good AI. And I see that in organizations large and small. People seem to lose the understanding of the data very quickly. And then the business moves so fast. It's the old Eisenhower matrix of urgent versus important. They can focus on what's urgent, showing something on a dashboard, for example, but not what's important. How do they get there?
So when you come into these teams and you start poking around with a flashlight, what are you looking for? What are kind of the telltale signs of how they've been approaching their data platform or not, as the case may be?
I ask them if they've got any Excel spreadsheets they'd like to show me. Now, I know that sounds a really odd place to start, but if all of their data is sitting in Excel spreadsheets and they're not using the enterprise data warehouse, for example, that tells me the data warehouse is not fit for purpose. It tells me they're in a state of data anarchy. They've got data all over the place. No one's looking after it. They're probably doing lots in those Excel spreadsheets that are perhaps good from a user point of view, but from a testing and robust perspective, probably not really where they should be. I remember having one customer once who swore blind they had no spreadsheets at all. And then I met a business analyst when I'd been there back and forth about 3 months. And she said, I've got a spreadsheet to show you. And I sat with her. By the end of it, the hour, my head was in my hands. She's so many spreadsheets. She had a spreadsheet to help keep track of all the spreadsheets. And this was the organisation that swore blind. They had no Excel anywhere at all. That told me a lot about the business because I then went back to the IT department and to the CTO. And I said, you said you had no Excel. No, we don't, they said. I said, you do. I've uncovered a whole lot of it in someone's laptop. And worse, it wasn't really on their laptop, it was in their email. You know, Microsoft Exchange is not a document storage mechanism. They had no idea what was the latest version of the spreadsheet. It was all in their email. It was awful. And the whole time I was there, they didn't really tackle the problem of the little data. And it's the little data I'm looking for. We talk a lot about big data, it's a hashtag. But actually, often what's really important is the business little data that's sitting in people's hard drives or that the business won't let you access. They're using that to make decisions or maybe to make bridging or mapping tables, for example. This is equal to that. So I'm really looking for that. I'm looking for the data that's fallen between all the cracks and people's attitudes to that data.
The Excel thing is so interesting because it sounds like it's a signal that people at the company are not getting what they need from the existing data structure, whatever is believed to be the source of truth, they're not getting it, so they're doing it on their own. Is that kind of what it's telling about people who are keeping their own spreadsheets?
Yes, absolutely. They're not getting what they need. And there's a culture of people empiring data. They build little empires. And what happens is sometimes the culture of the organization is poor. They're worried perhaps about keeping their job. So it's the old adage about knowledge and information is power, power is control. So people start to control and they build up these little data silos that they don't share. So it tells me a lot about the organisation, because if the culture's not good, trying to do an innovative AI project is probably going to fail because you need people on board. And that's why it's so important to have that executive sponsor. When I leave an organisation, a brave CTO will sometimes say, tell me 10 things that you don't want to tell me about my business. 10 things that you feel awkward telling me. I'll give you a day to think about it, one man said. In that case, I came up with 20 things. So I could have kept going if I'd had more time.
What are some of the things?
One was not doing backups properly of their data. And I'd mentioned this very many times as I'd gone along. But it's very difficult in an organisation when you've got someone who's not doing their job properly like that, because you know that you can encourage them to do backups, for example. But there's a point at which you have to decide, do I escalate this or do I just walk away from it? And I would have told him anyway, as I was leaving, that there was no backups done. But I was actually really pleased that he'd proactively asked me about things that made me uncomfortable. It turned out in that case, I was right, and I knew I was right. And the gentleman in question didn't last the day. So sometimes you have a really big impact when you go into an organisation. I was able to prove everything, and it was a contractor who was charging them a lot of money and not doing his job. So it was bad for the contractor, but good for the organisation. And it was quite a hard thing to say, but I had spotted this and no one else seemed to have seen it. And everyone seemed to like this individual. And it was quite difficult, I think, because you need to make friends enough that you can get your job done and the project pushed through. But at the same time, it's really tough because you're being parachuted into a culture which is maybe not as open as it needs to be doing an innovative AI project. And if people are not doing their jobs properly and the culture's not fit for purpose, that's really tough to change that, I think.
It's interesting. You mentioned that early on that you wind up tangled in the people and cultural aspect of things. I was surprised to hear that because you're such an empirical person, because you have this background in data science and coding, et cetera. What does it look like when a company is doing a good job with their data culture? I guess if they were doing a good job, maybe they wouldn't be calling you. But let's maybe start with what a good example would be, and then we'll do the opposite, I guess.
Yes, I like to think that I start with the end in mind. So when you're right, they've called me because there's a problem. Sometimes I make the decision to leave because my job is done and I've helped to turn the ship around. So when that happens, I notice myself I'm doing less of the hands-on work because I've mentored other people to do the hands-on work, and they need me less and less as time goes on. And that's good because I don't have the attention span to do the same job for 20, 30 years. I like the idea of lifting up everyone to make the organisation better. So when I see that they are self-sufficient, they're able to run their own projects, they're pretty much handling the code themselves. If not, they're at least good enough to troubleshoot by themselves. They've got a good support structure in place. And I'm trying to build a rinse and repeat formula for them. So I want them doing like DevOps, for example. So they need an example of how to build applications, how to roll them out. I need to think about that from a data perspective as well. And once they see what good looks like and they're able to do it themselves, that's when I start to back off, because I think I've achieved that now. They're self-sufficient, they don't need me. But also a bit of me gets a bit bored then because, the challenge is gone.
Yeah, of course. So what do you think if you put yourself in the mind of the chief data officer, the chief technology officer, what is starting to break in the organization where they might think we need to bring someone like Jennifer in to sort this out?
I think what happens is they usually get pressure from elsewhere because the business teams are not getting the data that they want and not getting the results that they want. There's usually quite a divorce between IT and the business. And I think sometimes IT departments can become very egotistical and they don't have the right to be. Because if they were doing a good job, the business wouldn't be complaining so much. So that's an internal thing. I think also the external pressures come from the fact they see their competitors doing interesting things with data. They feel left behind. They may get, say, a request for a proposal and they can't fulfill it. And they can't do that because they don't have the skill set and they don't have a good data platform. So I usually come in when there's two things in place. One is a crisis, and the second thing is an executive sponsor who needs to clean up that crisis. If the crisis is not being handled by an executive sponsor, then there's nothing I can do because I'll never get it pushed through. They've got themselves into a bad state. And I have to watch that I don't become the blame hound. I don't get blamed for that. So I really need someone who's going to help me to unblock things to make them successful. And those things can be quite tough. So I think a lot of issues in business are really down to the people, to the culture. They are concerned about their jobs. Maybe they don't like change. People don't like change and they don't like to be changed. And when something like AI comes along, they're looking at it thinking, this is a whole lot of change. So again, it's coming back to that gently, incrementally approach. Show small success. I think the days are over of people wanting big bang projects. And they say around year 2000, people would take maybe 2-3 years to build a data warehouse. Those days are over, they're gone. We need to think about delivering in a more agile fashion.
What is the difference between a 2 to 3 year data warehouse and what you think is necessary now?
I think with a 2 to 3 year data warehouse, it's set up in a very waterfall fashion. So whatever's gone in place, whatever the business needed 2-3 years ago is not what they're going to
Too
need.
late. Yeah.
2-3 years down the line. I remember working for a consulting firm and I was delivering very small data warehouse projects using Microsoft technology at the time. And in this consulting arm, there was another team that were delivering very extensive data warehouses with another type of technology. And they were taking 2-3 years to do projects. And that project that they did actually failed, not because it failed technically, it was technically very complex. It just no longer fitted the needs of the business. And for me, the real success criteria is about, do the business adopt it? Do the users adopt it? User adoption is so tough anyway when you're trying to roll out software programs. But when you're dealing with AI, business intelligence, data warehousing, if they don't like it, they won't use it, they'll tip back into Excel, and the business has spent a lot of money for nothing. Whereas small agile means that the business gets continuity of success, and they also have the ability to have lots of input, and that stickiness helps you to make sure that you will eventually have that user adoption and the success criteria. Customers sometimes ask me for all sorts of things, and they usually have a wish list because when they get excited, they get really excited, and I become this like fairy godmother that's going to solve all their problems. So it's very difficult because I have to say, well, in the last sprint, we said we deliver XYZ, and now halfway through the sprint, you are now asking me to change everything and go off in a different direction. And that's what I mean, but it's not what I say. What I say is I don't say no, I just say not yet. Because very often they're so enthusiastic. If you say no to them, they're going to be really upset. And again, it's all about people and culture. So what I say is we'll add it to the backlog, or work tasks. We'll add it to the backlog and then we will prioritise according to your commitments at the next sprint planning meeting. Because I know next time I'm going to have someone else coming down the corridor with another wish list who's also going to ask for 10 different things. So not yet is the secret. That's what you say when they ask you for lots and lots of different things, because they will. But that's good.
Yeah, treat them like a toddler. When they ask for something, say maybe for your birthday, maybe for Christmas, not yet.
If you're really, really good and you ask Santa really nicely, and I'm Santa, so
and you're not naughty for the next few months, you maybe will get you this data warehouse.
yeah, I do think sometimes businesses are like children. Actually, they want things that are not good for them. They want them yesterday. They want them now, and they stamp their feet till they get. And that person can be quite difficult to deal with because I'm not like that. I tend to be, maybe because I'm a data person, a bit more plodding. But I try and harness that passion if I can, which can be very tough because they want their AI thing done so they can go and tell people they're doing AI. So you're just trying to bring them along a journey that can be difficult to educate them as well. I don't expect them to sit and do the maths behind an algorithm, but just to try and understand a bit better what some of the problems actually are.
Yeah, of course. What are some of the data management practices people could be putting into place to perhaps stop things from getting so dire that they would need to call you in? I'm not asking you to advise how to get yourself out of a job here, but what should people be doing so that it doesn't become so bad, besides, of course, staying out of Microsoft Exchange?
Yeah, I think I would like to see more organisations having a data amnesty and being very honest about what data sources they are using, where they are, and which data sources they are not using. Every organisation hangs on to their data without really thinking about what the important data is, what the vital data is. I think this is where I think a data dictionary starts to become very useful because people often don't know where to find the data they're looking for. They don't know what it means. And very often I get dragged into trying to figure out what the data means. It's not really what I'm there for, but I'm finding I'm having to take that step back before I can move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are the questions you can ask to determine what is the data you should maybe let go of?
Yeah, in terms of the data to let go of, I like to try and run reports on the system to see who's accessing what data, when, and how often. I know that probably sounds like I'm spying on them, but I have had cases where the customer might say, I want these 22 things in this report, and it has to be done by Friday, and I have to go and scrabble around to find someone to do it. Then you deliver it, and then they don't look at it. So what I do is I go back with my armour on and I say, well, the last few reports you requested at the last minute, I've noted that you haven't actually used them. So what is it you're trying to achieve? Because what you're asking for and what you're getting seem to be two different things. And let's take a bit of a step back, try and work out what are you trying to achieve. And often when I ask that, it turns out there's something else in the organisation that might give them that or give them something very close to that. I think sometimes people are not very good at asking for what they need. Trust but verify. I think it's good to prototype as well. And when you prototype, you can understand what they want to see in the dashboard, and then you can start to understand what data sources are they really not using.
Yeah, that's interesting because, like you say before, everyone says big data, it's a hashtag. And I can think for a long time, the perspective was the more data, the better. Like, let's just get as much as possible and we'll sort it out later. It sounds like you're prescribing a leaner approach.
Yeah, I think you need to understand the nature, the reliability, the format, and the quality of the data that you're looking at. Because I remember holding a presentation once, and at the end, someone said, "What's the largest size of database you've ever created?" And I just thought, I said, "Well, I don't know. I would have to think about that." And I thought, what a silly question. But I was going to move on. But he said, "My biggest database is 150 gigs." And I thought, I know I've produced way more than that. But I thought, I don't know what to say to this person because it could be 150 gigs worth of rubbish. You just don't know. And I think I made a sort of comment along those lines of it's not the size, it's the quality, the nature, the format. You can generate synthetic data and produce the huge whopping database, but it's not going to be used for anything. What is the point? We need to think about the volume versus the quality. So people do want more data, a lot. But sometimes I think what they're looking for is, if they have every data source possible, then some of it might be good quality. And the more we have, then we've got more chance of finding data that's better quality. So I think it's a bit of a strange mindset, but I see where they're coming from. I remember going through with a finance department and asking them, tell me about your reports, just like an introductory workshop, show me what you're using. And they showed me this very simple report with 10 columns on it. And I said, all right, so how much of this is right? This is a finance department. And she said, well, we know 6 of the columns are right. And I said, okay, the other 4 are wrong? And she said, yes. And I said, well, that means 60% of the report is wrong. Is that kind of where you're sitting at with your data? And she said, yes, but we know which columns are wrong. And I thought, that's not really the point, is not to that, which ones are the wrong columns. Have you thought about fixing them, is obviously my next question. And then that's when you get sort of batted away because people are empiring again.
Yeah, well, you're asking them to do work. You're asking them to go clean things up, which is, that's not fun maybe, but it is necessary.
Exactly, because when it's 60-40, it's too close to 50-50 for my liking.
Yeah, it's a coin flip.
So,
like, why do you even bother looking at data? Just flip a coin and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly, I know.
So maybe a pedestrian question, Jennifer, but I am curious as we wrap here, why the name Data Relish?
I wanted people to love and relish their data. I know that larger data firms talk about love your data. It's a bit of a hashtag, and I thought, I can't use that, I'll get sued. So I was thinking, what could I do that would show that people could get excited about their data? Because I seem to see lots of problems where people don't want to look at it. And I really want to get people to the point where they've got a successful solution that they're proud of, they're happy they worked on it, and they're really relishing it. And that was why I did work with one of the best data science teams I worked with ever. Were not data scientists. One had a history degree, one had an English literature degree, one was an accountant, and they just came at the data science with such gusto that I really liked that. And I taught them all about the algorithms. I taught them to write SQL and R. I taught them about data storage, and it was a great project because they just really did relish the opportunity, and they've all gone on to do great things now. But I think I regard that as one of my achievements, to be honest.
I love that. I love this idea that it's not something to be afraid of or not something to be a chore. That's like, if you enjoy it, if you have gusto and you're thrilled about it, then your data will sing for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I want people to understand the value that they can have, because when your data is good, it can change lives when people are able to automate things. I remember years ago building a really small package to transfer data and join 2 tables together. It was something super simple. And I showed this woman that I didn't know very well, and I showed her what I'd done, and she started to cry. And I thought, what have I done? Have I upset her? Oh no, because people get very sensitive about their data. And she said, I copy these 2 data sets together in Excel every night, and I have to stay behind late to do it. And it takes me away from my family. I want to go home and spend time with my children, but I'm stuck in work, copying and pasting. And what you've done is you've given me more time to spend with my children. And it was really powerful. I wanted to cry as well, to be honest, but when she said that. But I think if you can automate things and see people as actual human beings, that you are there to help, and getting the data right helps individuals. And if we can send people like that home a bit early to spend more time with their kids, that's a huge win for me.
It absolutely is. In addition to all of the bottom line business things and the ROI and the money, you can also change a life and have someone spend the time on what they really want to spend the time on. So, Jen, I've loved chatting with you about all this stuff today. And I think this episode has been full of advice for people, things they can look around in their own data operations and perhaps shine the flashlight like you do and make things more efficient. So at this point, I would just say thank you so much for being here, Jen. I've loved chatting with you today.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you very much.
How AI Happens is brought to you by Sama. Sama provides accurate data for ambitious AI. specializing in image, video, and sensor data annotation and validation for machine learning algorithms in industries such as transportation, retail, e-commerce, media, medtech, robotics, and agriculture. For more information, head to sama.com.